Today we're going to be talking about nonfiction text structures. There are 5 main text structures: description, sequence, which we also call chronological order, compare and contrast, cause and effect, and problem and solution. Description is exactly what it sounds like. It's when a nonfiction article describes something or someone. Sequence, which we usually call chronological order, is when a nonfiction article tells something in order by time. For example, if you're going to tell about someone's life starting at their birth and ending at their death, or if you're going to tell the steps on how to do something. Compare and contrast is when you're comparing two things and telling how they're alike and how they're different. Cause and effect is when something happens, what caused it to happen, and what the effect was because of that thing. And then problem and solution, what's the problem and how is it solved. Today we're going to be looking at sequence or chronological order. Some key words for chronological order are before, in the beginning, to start, first, next, during, after, then, finally, last, in the middle, and in the end. When we're talking about chronological order, we can use a graphic organizer called a flow map to sequence or to write down the progression of events that happen. And we're going to talk more about that. Today we're going to be reading John F. Kennedy by Lakin and Jordan Haney. John F. Kennedy was the 35th President of the United States. John F. Kennedy's nickname was JFK. John F. Kennedy was born on May 29, 1917 in Brookline, Massachusetts, to Joseph Patrick and Rose Fitzgerald Kennedy. John Kennedy graduated from Choate Preparatory School in 1935. Kennedy graduated from Harvard in June 1940. He then spent some months in 1940 and 1941 studying the Stanford University Graduate School of Business in California. Here you can see an image, and the caption says, John F. Kennedy with his brothers Robert and Ted. That gave us more information about who these people are in the picture. During World War II, Kennedy joined the U.S. Navy. In 1943, he was commander of a PT boat, torpedo boat, in the Pacific. After the war, Kennedy returned home to Massachusetts to take up a political career. He was elected to the U.S. Congress in 1946 and re-elected in 1948 and 1950. In 1952, he was elected to the U.S. Senate and re-elected in 1957. He married Jacqueline Lee Bouvier on September 12, 1953, and they had 3 children. He was president from 1961 until 1963. Lyndon Baines Johnson was his vice president. Here's an image of Lyndon B. Johnson, and we know that from the caption here. To many Americans, Kennedy symbolized youth, culture, and a future filled with promise. Kennedy supported civil rights, the exploration of outer space, and the arts. Here's another image, and we know that this photograph was taken on November 22nd, 1963 in Dallas, Texas, because of this label or caption here. He initiated the Peace Corps, a volunteer program that invited Americans to come to the aid of people in developing countries. In foreign policy, Kennedy confronted major challenges by the Soviet Union in Cuba and Berlin. On November 22, 1963, Kennedy was in Dallas, Texas on a political tour of the state. Accompanied by Mrs. Kennedy and Texas Governor John B. Connally, they were riding in an open car in a motorcade when shots rang out, striking the president in the head and neck. Kennedy was rushed to the hospital, but he died without ever regaining consciousness. John F. Kennedy is buried in Arlington National Cemetery. An eternal flame lit by his widow marks his grave. And here's his grave, along with the caption here. So after reading the article John F. Kennedy, we are going to put this information in a flow map in chronological order, meaning in order by time. So in the first box, we're going to put the first bit of information pertaining to the article. So it says John F. Kennedy graduated from Choate Preparatory School in 1935. Kennedy graduated from Harvard in June 1940. He then spent some months in 1940 and 1941 studying at the Stanford University Graduate School of Business in California. So this is all about his schooling. So we are going to copy this and we are going to put it in this first box. Let's go back to the article and see what happens next in his life. During World War II, Kennedy joined the U.S. Navy. In 1943, he was the commander of a PT boat in the Pacific. That seems like a good bit of information, so we are going to copy that and put it in the second box. All right, let's go back to the article. After the war, Kennedy returned home to Massachusetts to take up a political career. He was elected in the U.S. Congress in 1946 and re-elected in 1948 and 1951. In 1952, he was elected to the U.S. Senate and re-elected in 1957. Wow, that's a lot of information. We are only going to take this part because this tells us about his political career. We don't need to know that he returned home to Massachusetts. So we're going to copy that. We're going to put it in our third box here. Moving on to the fourth box. He married Jacqueline Lee Bouvier on September 12, 1953 and had 3 children. That's very important to his life. So we are going to add that to the fourth box. He was president from 1961 until 1963. Lyndon Baines Johnson was his vice president. We're just going to put that he was president from 1961 to 1963. Put that here. We can make that one bigger because it'll fit in the box. All right. To many Americans, Kennedy symbolized youth, culture, and a future filled with promise. Kennedy supported civil rights, the exploration of outer space, and the arts. While that is important information, it doesn't really fit in our timeline because there aren't any dates in it. So we're going to scroll down to the next piece. He initiated the Peace Corps, a volunteer program that invited Americans to come to the aid of people in developing countries. In foreign policy, Kennedy confronted major challenges by the Soviet Union and Cuba. We are actually going to put those in because those are important to his life that he did those things. So we're actually going to start here. Copy that. Put it in box 5. Moving on to, box 6. Moving on to 7. He initiated the Peace Corps. That is very important. Actually, I'm just going to put he initiated the Peace Corps. There. Box 8. Kennedy confronted the major challenges by the Soviet Union in Cuba and Berlin. These are important things that he did in his life, and I'm actually going to add that here because these are all important things that he did to help the country. And then on November 22nd, 1963, Kennedy was in Dallas, Texas on a political tour of the state. Accompanied by Miss Kennedy and Texas Governor John B. Connally, they were riding in an open car in a motorcade when shots rang out, striking the president in the head and neck. So we are actually going to put this, and I'm actually just going to say, I'm going to copy this, and instead of typing all of that, we're going to say on November 22nd, 1963, Kennedy was in Dallas, Texas when he was shot and killed. And then the last thing we need to know is that he was buried in the Arlington National Cemetery, and his grave is marked with an eternal flame lit by his wife. So, as you can see, we now have a timeline of the life of John F. Kennedy. We have used a flow map to show the chronological text structure, which means it is structured by events in time, and we went in order by time. Now I want you to read the article, Getting Back Up, Lindsey Vonn, and think in your head what text structure applies to this article, and then you're going to respond to a question in your daily writing